Next up is the five-time champions, Mumbai Indians. Yeah, they had plenty of options to choose from for the four retentions, and I think three of the options were pretty straightforward. Were forward, which is Rohit Sharma, Bumrah, and Pollard. I think for the fourth option, they had quite a few options: Sky, Ishan Kishan, or the Pandya brothers. I think they went with Sky in the end, and yeah, so I think it was pretty obvious that they would go all out for Ishan Kishan. So like, I think most of them knew it. How do you think they went about in the auction?
So it's an interesting case, right? All of us know that they were heavily dependent on going on two players, which are Ishan Kishan and Jofra Archer, for which they had to keep a lot of money, and they still managed to come good. They hardly picked anybody on day one, and on day two they kind of managed to pull together a very solid, formidable 11. So when you look at that 11 there at first 11, it's pretty. Yes, it's not as good as the previous Mumbai Indian 11s, but it's still pretty solid out there. They have some really aggressive stroke makers. They have some good finishers. They have some experience. It doesn't have that Mumbai Indian stamp, but I think they're playing the long game. They have Jofra Archer in now with their team. They have Deval Brevis, so maybe they have the future ABD there. Who knows? And imagine then suddenly how good that team looks. So they managed to make up for a lot of their early misses, and they've done a pretty good job. Again, it's a good 11. Like most other teams, it's a good 11, but very few teams have the depth, which I think is going to decide who are the teams which are actually going to make it and who are not.
I felt at least apart from Bumrah, their Indian pace bowling options, at least I felt were like pretty, unproven, like, or they were in the IPL before. Like if you look at Thampi or Unadkat and others, right? They've been in the IPL before, but they haven't been that successful, right? So would you think that might be like a weak point there?
Yeah, but I think they did bid for a lot of players. From auction strategy perspective, it's not like they didn't want. I think they bid for a lot of players and they had to settle with what they got finally. So I think I would say, if I remember right, they bid for Saini, they bid for Khalil, they bid for. Trying to think, they did bid for a few more fast bowlers, but they
I
didn't
think they
get
went
anybody.
all out for Avesh Khan initially as well.
Yeah,
Correct. So
they
they did
tried.
have a
Hmm.
few names. In fact, went for Chahal also big time. And then they had to settle with Markande and Murugan Ashwin. So I think because of that Archer bid, they had to kind of control
Hold
their
back.
budget a little
Hmm.
bit.
Right. So looking back at that, like I felt like Tim David, like fine, like they paid 8.25. He's, he's your scouting player in that sense. Like he's not in the international scene, but all franchises were obviously looking at other T20 leagues. Maybe because of that, I felt like they did not leave enough money for like Indian bowlers. So that seems a bit weak. At least uh, that's what I felt. So what's your take on like Tim David, right? Like he's never played in the IPL, not an international from like Australia yet, and 8.25 for him.
So obviously Tim David came a bit late, so they had to pick up a few fast bowlers. They had to go bit behind a few fast bowlers before that, and they failed doing getting that. So then they realized that they need a finisher. So they kind of kept the same template, guys. So if you look at their previous team, uh, who replaces Hardik Pandya? They've realized there's nobody in India who can replace Hardik Pandya. So they've gone with the overseas player in Tim David. They feel that he can be that finisher with Pollard. Pollard's anyway bowling. So Pollard and Tim David form the finishing combination. And
Mhm.
the role they're going to miss the most is that of Kunal Pandya, and they've replaced him with Sanjay Yadav, who does exactly the same thing. So the more or less the structure will still remain the same. They always had an overseas opener along with Rohit. This time they've gone for the Indian opener with Rohit and Kishan opening. They've opened up an overseas slot. So small changes to their combination, but more or less it's the same thing.
Cool. And then what's your rating for them then? Like the whole squad.
I would also give them a 7.
Sure. Can we move on to the playing 11?
So
So,
Rohit, Ishan,
yep.
Sky, Brevis, Pollard,
Brevis
Tim
walks into
David.
your playing.
No, he doesn't walk in. I'll get back to the other option. It'll be mostly a bit. There's one more combination I have in mind. Brevis,
Mhm.
Pollard, Tim David, Sanjay Yadav. Murugan Ashwin, Unadkat, Bumrah, and it's either Mills slash Sam slash Meredith. So, in case they don't want to play, say, Deval Brevis, they could always play Fabian Allen as one more finisher right down there, or they could even play two fast bowlers, which they usually do, overseas bowlers. Since they have Timel Mills, they could go with the Riley Meredith for pace instead of a Unadkat. So they have that combination. So Brevis is that free overseas slot. I think Pollard, Tim David, and maybe one overseas quick among Mills, Meredith, and Sam's walk in. So Brevis has to be replaced by maybe someone like a Tilak Verma, is what I think will end up happening. Tilak Verma is touted to be pretty good. So I think Tilak Verma walks into that particular position, and you then replace Jaydev Unadkat with another foreign pacer.
Pacer eventually, hopefully, is Archer for their sake. So
Yeah, perfect. Makes sense.
There are talks about Archer. Maybe he might be available for part of the season this year. I think ECB is contemplating, thinking that his scans are pretty good. So, how deadly would be the if it happens? How deadly
Yeah,
would it be?
it
Bumrah
will
and
be
Archer.
amazing, but I don't know whether it's going to happen. I don't think he is going to play this time. But if it does, that's going to be very exciting to see how they both bowl in the play in the death.
It's literally 8 overs. Like you don't get much, and you have to score from the rest of the 12 overs. So
Yeah,
it's
that's true. But those other 12 overs seem right now pretty reasonably okay. Maybe if Timel Mills could be, if he's also informed, then it becomes very hard.